Today on Around the Coin podcast, we have the CEO of Ripple Labs, Chris Larsen, discussing the future of payments, the strategy behind Ripple, and the tremendous opportunities in cryptocurrency over the coming years. Around the Coin podcast.
All right, guys, we're really excited today. We have a guest on the show. Chris Larsen is the CEO and co-founder of Ripple Labs, as well as myself, Mike Townsend, Brian Romley, and Faisal Khan. So we'll kind of let Chris introduce himself and take it where it goes. Thanks for having us, Chris. Thanks for being on the show.
No, absolutely. No, thanks so much for having us on the show. We really appreciate it. So as you mentioned, I'm the CEO of Ripple Labs. Ripple Labs is the company that first built the Ripple protocol, and there's about 50 of us, mostly based in San Francisco. We have some of our team members in New York and also Beijing as well. And what we're really trying to, I don't know if you want me to jump right into it, but
jump right into it. Tell a little bit about your background, what you're trying to do. It'd be interesting to hear a little bit how you personally got into it. Like the inspiration, sure. I think is interesting.
Sure, yeah. So before Ripple Labs, I was involved with two other fintech ventures. The first one was called eLoan. eLoan was an online lender that we eventually took public during the first .com boom. And eLoan was sort of retailing consumer loans using the internet to sort of disintermediate loan agents, auto finance agents, that sort of thing. So it was kind of step one of the internet, the idea of disintermediation. The second company was Prosper, ran that for 8 years, and Prosper was a peer-to-peer lending marketplace. So kind of in our view, that was kind of maybe step two. There was sort of the disintermediation phase on fintech, kind of first .com wave, second .com wave after the crash. I think it was clear that sort of the eBays, the Craigslist, the marketplaces stood out as kind of the models that were getting a lot of attention. And that's what Prosper was trying to do, different than eLoan being kind of a retail disintermediator. We were trying to be a marketplace, sort of a neutral marketplace where borrower and lender, peer-to-peer, could come together. And then, I got interested in this idea of new currencies, global currencies, a little bit from my background, my experience from eLoan and Prosper, where I think what was really clear is that while information was sort of being revolutionized globally, I mean, you just had data everywhere. You had the Googles everywhere. Certainly, social network kind of taking off. What you still saw in fintech was really kind of a country by country approach. So Prosper, eLoan could only be country by country. You'd have to establish a separate company in Japan or in Europe, and they could only operate in those countries. So the thing that was sort of, fintech's always very exciting, but the thing that was frustrating was there was no sort of really internet for finance. And that's really held back, I think, the innovations in fintech. So what's really exciting about this whole, what do you call it, cryptocurrency movement or math-based currency movement or real-time settlement system, or what we like to call it, internet for value. That's really what we see happening right now with this possibility of sort of a new way of constructing and sending value around the world. Is just that now our finance systems, and therefore all the companies that build on top of them, I think are entering the post-internet phase, about 20 years kind of delayed. So we've certainly had an internet for information exchange, for 20 years now. But I think it's safe to say the financial services businesses really have not been changed very much. And I think it's because the underlying guts of it still are based on pre-internet technology. So what's so exciting, I think, from what I've seen the last 20 years now of fintech, is maybe for the very first time, you're actually getting the real revolutionary aspects of the internet now moving from information, moving into the ability to not just exchange information, but to exchange value. And that is really a fundamental big change. So that's what's exciting to us, and that's what Ripple Labs is trying to do. We're trying to basically create a protocol that can be used as an internet for information exchange based on a new technology that's only a couple years old. So some ways, I guess. I'm
now,
sorry,
Chris, if I've never heard of any other, cryptocurrency, algorithmic currency, I don't know what Bitcoin is. If you could take a step back and sort of explain the topography, 10,000-foot view, and then kind of get closer and closer to what your vision is for Ripple and what it is internally and maybe where it's going.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Yeah, so I guess stepping way back, the world figured out about 2 decades ago how to exchange information without a central operator. So this idea you had to have a central communications company or a switching company. I remember the days when I traveled to Europe, and if I wanted to make a call to my parents, I'd have to line up at some communication center, pay a fortune, sort of wait in line to get a phone booth. So those were the days when information just was not, moving like it does today on the internet. Turns out there's now, again, that has not happened in value exchange, I think, until now. So why was that? It's because there's a higher bar for the movement of value than there is for the movement of information. And the big difference is it doesn't matter if we send information more than once, right? All that matters is it's sent instantly for free anywhere on Earth. It didn't matter if you sent that same email or picture a million times. Might be annoying, but it doesn't matter. You communicated. With value, however, matters fundamentally if you send the thing more than once. Value or transactions, payments, whatever you want to call it, right? That's just a different animal than information. It absolutely matters if you send it more than once. Hence, this is the discussion of how do you prevent value from being spent again once it's already been spent. Well, the world simply didn't know how to do that in any other way than by having a central operator, whether that be a Visa or, fill in the blank from whatever country, China Union Pay or whatever. So country by country, we need to have a central operator to confirm that, yep, payment's been made and you can't make another one. You don't have enough money in your account after you made that last payment, right? The world simply did not know how to architect, long and short, the exchange of value on the fundamentals of the internet, which are peer-to-peer, distributed, no central operator. A couple of years ago, there was a breakthrough. And many people have heard of Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin was the first example of that breakthrough. So long and short of it is the world now knows how to exchange value without a central operator. Therefore, the world has the ability to architect the fundamental guts of our value exchange systems, our payment systems, in pretty much the exact same way that we've already architected information exchange, because we have figured out how to collectively, on a peer-to-peer distributed basis, confirm that value either has been sent or hasn't been sent. So that's the big change up that's happened in the last couple of years as sort of technology progresses. That's a real fundamental breakout. Now I think we're entering the stage of, okay, world knows how to do that. What the heck does that mean? And what incredible businesses are going to be built on top of it? And what implications is that going to have for the economy and the way people live?
So, Chris, could we call Ripple more of an envelope that carries the value and it doesn't really care necessarily what's inside that envelope? Is that a better way maybe we can illustrate it?
Yeah, that's a very accurate way of saying it. So what we're trying to do is build this idea of a protocol that's really enables the internet for value exchange. So it is completely value agnostic. To your point, it's an envelope you can put anything in and then zip it around, just like our Internet of Information allows us to zip packets of information of any kind, whatever that information is, anywhere instantly, basically for free, that now companies can build services and make money on top of. It's exactly what we're trying to do with the Ripple protocol, that any currency, and again, we think these technologies will be used, two things, will be used for existing things of value that People today use dollars, euro, yuan, real, rupee, airline miles, merchant reward points, gold. Humans already use a lot of things of value as some form of currency or payment or value exchange. So there's no problem, we think, in having things of value. The problem is, like information used to be 20 years ago, you used to have information trapped at the local library. You couldn't get easily that information from the library to your friend in India. Information was trapped. Now that's all been loosened up. That's where we want to go with value, that it flows just freely in any form, instantly, basically for free, anywhere there's an internet of information exchange should be an internet for value exchange.
So would it also serve as a lockbox? Could the value be held inside of the Ripple network, not necessarily removed at any specific date?
So that's a great question. What we're really trying to do is enable kind of the existing things of value. Most existing things of value are not really assets. They are really some form of liability to some form of counterparty. So, for example, if I have $100 in my PayPal balance, what do I really have? I own a liability that PayPal is responsible for. PayPal is the counterparty. If PayPal goes bankrupt, I can lose my money. So I think what's important to remember is that in these new technologies, in this new sort of internet for value exchange, the value more than likely is going to be maybe analogous to information that you might have sitting at some provider, maybe an email provider, maybe Google. Maybe you're going to have it on some cloud computing service. Because you can move the information freely anywhere and very inexpensively, you still have pretty much the same human risks that you would have anywhere else, right? So if that cloud-based computing company, all their disks get destroyed, you're probably going to lose your information. Hopefully it's been backed up and such. So I think it's important to note that this is a huge breakout technology, but all of those elements of trust with existing financial players and the way our existing financial systems work, those don't necessarily change. I mean, again, most things of value are going to be involving some counterparty that in some form has to be trusted or not, that is going to entail all the same risks. So I think that's important to know this technology does not do away with that dynamic of human interaction still basically remains. What's being transformed here is just that ability to move any kind of value instantly, basically for free, anywhere there's the internet. That's the big game change. I think a lot of times the new technologies things can get conflated, what really will change, what is fundamental and kind of remains, and so that's the way I would kind of describe it.
What would be a simple example use case? Let's just look at Ripple today and maybe explain how one would use it and who would be in the ecosystem. Are there developers, banks? Just a simple example.
Also, it'd be also interesting to hear what's a simple example 5 years from now, 10 years from now,
exactly.
Sort of how that progresses.
Perfect.
So a really simple example is if I go down to my bank, I use Citibank, and I want to send $20 to India. There's kind of no way to do that. It just and why is that? It's because Citi, even though it's a global organization, it simply can't just move value in seconds like it does an email to India in rupee. Without it chewing up pretty much that entire, $20 would all be chewed up in fees. It would take days to get there. Who knows what kind of exchange rate you get. So the promise of these technologies isn't necessarily that a consumer, in our view, has a Ripple account or anything like that. But likely now maybe I go to Citi, we'd hope eventually, again, full disclosure, they're not a partner and they're not integrated to Ripple yet. We hope they will be at one point. But then you go online and I got some family in India and I want to send them $20, maybe part of some tips that I got yesterday. And suddenly now you'll be able to send it It would basically be received maybe in practically full value. It will be received in 5 seconds. And it will route through maybe some hedge fund on Wall Street that has the absolute best rate of dollar to rupee, rather than routing through the retail banks. Probably not very good retail exchange rate.
Which is huge. Like, that's a really, really big deal.
Well, this is really interesting. What are the regulatory footprint for that type of scenario? Is that, from your best knowledge, is that something acceptable to bank regulators today?
We think that basic idea of real-time settlement, which you refer to as point-to-point payments or
Sure.
Straight-through processing or in-stream FX, we actually think there is a huge desire, when you read some of what the Fed is advocating for, of just that. There's a lot of writings now coming from the Federal Reserve of the U.S. in particular, saying that we need a real-time settlement system, that there are not only a lot of delays and costs, but actually risks. The risks of having a system where you have multiple ledgers, in sending dollars to India, who knows how many ledgers I'm going through? And this is part of the problem. This is why it takes days. It's not because, Citi is sitting on some thing that they have to, stamp it, 10 days from now. They've probably sent it. It's just they don't know how many intermediate ledgers it has to go through in the relationship they've established, probably with some correspondent bank in India. That's the problem. So everybody knows that there could be a better system, and it's probably a system that looks like our information system today, and that is now what's possible. So I think the idea regulators can get around. Now, in the execution, of course, you have a new technology that gets to the heart of moving payments and value around the world. Boy, I mean, obviously that's going to trigger every single concern about crimes and anti-money laundering and know your customer, which are really, really core to just about every government's, security objectives around limited, terrorism and crime and everything. So there's no question when you have something like this, that's this much of a change, is going to raise all kinds of red flags, which means there's going to be a period of very intense, kind of education. What is it? Review, and then trying to adopt existing laws and probably new laws. So you have a tension where, kind of the financial and economics folks that serve with regulators globally get that our current value system on Earth is pre-internet, needs to change, and it will be an improvement. But at the same time, you've got all the concerns about crime and anti-terrorism that are absolutely legitimate and need to be all worked out.
But fundamentally, the brilliance of what you're doing is you're working with the existing gatekeepers, right? So the gatekeepers that regulators are used to, that do the KYC, AML, are already in place. You're just intra-bank and interbank, changing the communication systems so that we're not using, wires and ACHs. Is that how I'm seeing it?
Yeah, that's exactly right. There's kind of two ways to go here. And this is typical of a lot of technological changes. It certainly could be, hey, old system broken, can't trust it, screw all that. Let's build a completely greenfield system, alternative system that everybody can use.
Bitcoin.
One way to go, and sometimes that works. The other way to go is to say, okay, what's really changing here? And I'll give you one example. A lot of people would point to irreversibility in these value exchange systems, right? Yes. And I think that's a good thing. But does that mean we suddenly do away with dispute resolution? Maybe, maybe not. It depends on the user and the use case. Probably most consumers want some form of dispute resolution. So
that would shift the world of commerce, right? I mean, one of the reasons why the credit card system works so well, if we go to the consumer level, is the repudiation that's available. The box shows up with rocks in it from some buyer or some seller. I mean, you need to be able to have a way to address that. And
that's exactly right. And so there's kind of this payment stack, right, or value exchange stack. It's, I guess you could probably say there's 6 components to it, right? Cash in, cash out, clearing and settlement, the foreign exchange part of it, and dispute resolution. I guess you could say there's messaging on top of that as well. So it's important to say what's changing in the stack. I actually don't think that cash in, cash out really is changing. You still need the storefront retail operations of some sort in some fashion globally. That pretty much doesn't change. We think in most cases, especially with consumers, you need the dispute resolution component. So that doesn't go away. I think what's changing here is clearing and settlement. It's going from multiple days to instant, and going from kind of multiple ledgers to one ledger, therefore less risk, less capital tied up. And then in-stream FX, that's a big deal. Instead of kind of getting trapped in whatever provider's rate you are just going to have to accept, you're suddenly always getting kind of the entire world's competitive marketplace of bids and asks. Those are the two things that are changing. So that's kind of our view. So we think, look, these things are not having to recreate every consumer application or every sort of bank relationship you have, all the custody, all the regulatory, all of the key services that are brought to the table. It doesn't even necessarily have to replace Notch's rules. All those rules, depending on the jurisdiction, can be ported on top of these new real-time settlement systems. So if you really think about it, these things are way, way, way at the bottom of the stack, in the same way that SMTP, an email protocol, is not used by consumers; it's used by email providers.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah, that's perfect. So XRP, that's where I think where I've been in payments for 30 years. That's where a lot of my colleagues who have really studied payments get confused, because it sort of creates a duality of what we just talked about, which I think is brilliant, possibly confusing to the consumer, but the killer app of currency transfer, conversion in real time, and the other things you talked about is just going to, I think, take over the world. But then we have XRP and the analogy that it's a Bitcoin-like thing, and I think that's where some of the confusion takes place.
Yeah, certainly. So maybe let me
Chris,
explain. Sure.
Yeah, one interesting thing I think is like what sort of keeps you up at night? I mean, it sounds extremely believable, but yet like a lot of things in the early stage, there's a lot of unknowns, and people draw from analogies when they try to assess the success of certain things. A lot of people are betting hard on Bitcoin. There's a couple ways that when we talk about sort of cryptocurrencies and the play out there, a couple ways that maybe it could go. It'd be interesting to hear your thoughts. Is it going to centralize around one process, Bitcoin for all, or is it going to be distributed through across, we're going to look at 100 different currencies the way sort of the world works now in each different country, or is there what you guys are doing, sort of like a combination of that, and then that infrastructure underneath.
Yeah, great question. Well, let me address that, and I'll kind of go back to the XRP part. But great question. So yeah, we'll keep. I guess probably the biggest thing for any startup, right? Anybody who's on a team starting something new, is the timing right? I mean, it's interesting with VCs. Look, you can make multiple bets over a long period of time. Money, if it didn't work out the first time, you have plenty of time to put a new, kind of investment in place, right? With teams and anybody's trying to do something new, you can't ever get the time back. So it's, okay, were you early enough? Were you too late? So probably just at the macro, most fundamental level, that's where you're always waking up one morning like, this is perfect. Next, oh my God, we're too late. Next moment, we're too early.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you could do, as everybody who's in the space today could be doing all of the kind of hard lifting on regulatory education, only to find that it just took too long. It was too exhausting. And, it's then the next group that comes along in 5 or 10 years that can benefit from that. And all the old players are gone. That happens all the time. Yeah. So, and you have no control over that. So, but in a way, you got to have to let that part go. So how does it play out? I think it's really, really early, and that's one thing. So I think a lot can happen. I think also the information to value exchange analogy holds up to a point. The one thing that's really different from value, payments, finance is there's just no way to get around that governments play a bigger role there. Mm-hmm. Certainly in some parts of the world, there is not information freedom, and we could argue even in the developing world, there's not true information. And that could be a political argument we could spend all day on. But I think safe to say there's probably globally more freedom on information exchange than there is on value exchange. There's more of a government presence globally. Even in the U.S., there is no fundamental right. There's fundamental right to free speech. Again, constantly argued, going back and forth. There's no constitutional right to value exchange freedom. Mm-hmm. So we just have to kind of accept that, I think, there is just a fundamentally more, kind of stronger presence of governments throughout the world that are going to have a stake in this. So I think that's where sometimes the Internet of Information last 20 years following that model could be a false path. And that it probably has to develop in a different way. We think probably has to be more integrated with the incumbent systems if it's going to get the traction it needs. So that's probably one thing I would say on that. And then to the I don't know should I address the XRP?
Yeah, I think it's fundamentally important to signify the differences between what you were talking about, intra and interbank, and what XRP represents, because that looks more like a consumer protocol.
Yeah, so XRP is the native currency of the protocol. It's a digital asset. So what does that mean? It simply means it's a asset or a currency, you could say, without a counterparty. And again, the broader technology here allows that for the first time, this notion that you can have an asset that's digital, that unlike that balance at PayPal, doesn't have a counterparty, which we think is really interesting. Now, in our view of the world, though, we don't think, that thing just kind of comes with the territory, right? If you have these protocols of value exchange that can determine whether or not value has been sent or not sent, or exists or doesn't exist, it's sort of trivial to include a asset into the protocol when you start. And therefore, why is that important? Is that if the protocol is successful, that digital asset will almost definitionally be successful as well.
So are you saying that XRP is independent of all the other things that we can put inside the container? So we got a container. So XRP just happens to be the jump start. It looks like it has a capital base of 45,363,000 as of a couple of minutes ago, right? So obviously there's somebody moving XRP back and forth.
Yeah, so and it depends how you measure market caps, right? If you say it's kind of the entire amount out there times the price, like a stock would be, or is it the amount of float times the price? But almost irrelevant. But sure. So again, why does it exist? Why did we make it? We didn't make it as the starring role of what we're trying to do. The starring role is the protocol, which will allow anything of value and never has to use XRP. Really important point is somebody who's trying to move dollars to British pounds never has to go through XRP. It could simply be, I'm holding dollars. I brought on dollars through my U.S. gateway or counterparty or bank, whatever is integrated to the protocol, and I'm moving it to a UK gateway or bank. And I use the market maker who's simply making markets between dollars and British pounds. Never touches XRP. However, we think in many cases, XRP will help enable transactions. Now, how does it do that? It's simply because we believe that market makers, so in the Ripple protocol ecosystem, there are gateways, people that bring dollar, euro, yuan balances onto the protocol. That's how you get value into the protocol. And then there's market makers. They're the ones that exchange one thing of value for another thing of value. And what does the Ripple protocol do? It's just trying to pathfind the most efficient path of exchanging that one thing of value for another. But because XRP plays a very unique role in having no counterparty, that means it has one variable, price, which is entirely objective. Everybody can agree on what is the price at any millisecond. It's just traded in the market. But it doesn't have a counterparty variable, which is endlessly subjective and is basically credit risk. No one can ever agree on credit risk, right, as a variable. So because of that, it is a useful instrument and a unique instrument. It's the only asset in the Ripple protocol by definition, right? So there's two types of things in the Ripple protocol or the Ripple ledger. One is this unique digital asset, the native currency XRP. And then there's everything else of value, which again is a liability to a counterparty. So as the only digital asset, it's really an efficient instrument to serve as sort of that common denominator between all things of value. So it'd be better in many cases, particularly for less liquid markets, for smaller currencies, from not sort of the world-leading counterparties. So again, you might make a direct market between B of A's dollars and Barclays British pounds, but kind of having, maybe the 12th largest remittance company in Mexico's peso balances, it would be very hard to get a market between that and the 8th largest remittance company in Kenya's shilling balances, right? That's an obscure market, very difficult to get enough liquidity between those two instruments. How is that solved? Have the 12th largest remittance company's peso balances be set against XRP through some market maker that focuses on Mexico, and then have some Kenyan-focused market maker that makes a market between that 8th largest Kenyan shilling balance and XRP. Now you've suddenly made the 12th largest peso balances one hop away from the 8th largest remittance company's shilling balances.
Wow.
So, Chris, what determines the value of an XRP? Because, right now it's trading just a little between 0.005, and it was at 1.6 cents. So what's controlling the underlying value of the currency? Is it supply and demand, or?
It's strictly supply and demand, and that demand is just up entirely to market forces to determine what that is. And again, short term, like probably anything else, and particularly in something new like this, very unpredictable, certainly very volatile. And again, this is why we think that most people will not want to think about XRP as the thing that they are going to be buying things in, right? We think most people are going to be using dollar, euro, yen, airline miles, whatever. And in our system, they don't have to think about XRP. We think market makers will think about XRP, and so markets could be driven by them. It can be driven by really any reason. I think long term, though, it is this notion that the primary use is to be something that enables market making, which is really helping to facilitate medium of exchange. And we think that's probably, like any currency or any thing of value, probably the most important kind of source of demand. And again, that's long term as more and more folks come on the protocol.
Yeah, that's really interesting. One thought, Chris, we get a lot of entrepreneurs that just want to learn more about payments. Part of the inspiration around it is that it's very complex, but also very opportunistic around the whole industry, especially cryptocurrency. Like you said, it's very, very new. If you're sort of listening to this show and you get really excited about this concept, what would sort of directions that you see? Sort of what I've experienced as being an entrepreneur is you see 100 opportunities, going down the years, down the path that, if you were to go back and do it again, you could build on these ideas. Are there things that you guys stumble across that are like, wow, I can't believe it's done this way? This is such a, this is a whole business opportunity in itself. If you're an entrepreneur here, what would you give them to sort of like dig into and get excited about and learn about and maybe create a big business around?
Well, that's a great question, because we think there's a ton of opportunity for developers.
I know.
It's just amazing.
It's
right?
almost overwhelming.
Yeah, it really is. Because what's going on here is that you've had a ton of payments innovation over the last 10 years, right? How many, wallet applications, incredible UI people, and tons of money that has been spent trying to change things. And what has been the real thing holding all of that back is that, they're building really cool kind of front end, the skin, but the basic infrastructure is still pre-internet and is super limited. And the real problem is, I know from Prosper and Elo, my last two companies, which again were pre-internet financial companies, basically, is, it's super hard to get into like the ACH system or to get a bank, kind of a bank to kind of sponsor you to get into the banking pipes.
Like now those walls are down.
Now those walls are down. Now this is equivalent to, again, HTTP. Google could just build whatever they wanted to build. In the pre-Internet of Information world, what would they have to do? They'd have to go to the New York Times and say, hey, is it okay if we set up a search algorithm on your page? It just never would have happened, right? So, and suddenly now people are free to kind of build and build and build. That doesn't mean they're free from regulation, not saying that at all, but just like the information companies, all the regulation applied to them, that will be an endless conversation and development there. But you suddenly have the ability to kind of repurpose all of those, kind of really cool skins and applications that were on the pre-internet system and limited suddenly can be built on these post-internet, HTTPs for value. So that's just kind of, you almost go through the whole list of everything that's been built so far and go, wait a minute, now if I could do it this way with this and that, how would it be now?
Yeah, right. Almost look at what exists already and just...
Chris, do you see Litecoin and Bitcoin confusing your mission? Because obviously they're grabbing headlines, and in some ways they sort of, I think, conflate and confound what you're doing interbank, intrabank.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, we're not trying to be a Bitcoin 2.0. We always struggle for the right analogy. Probably internet for value exchange is probably as close as we can get. Sometimes we used to say Swift 2.0, but in fact, we think there's lots of areas to partner with Swift. We actually like what Swift's doing, and there's some good tie-ins there. But so I do think there's really two really separate things that are happening here. One is this creation of the digital assets themselves as sort of that's the purpose and the starring role, and then second is kind of these distributed real-time settlement systems, which are really kind of foundational and like the guts of it. And they're just completely two different things. One of them is maybe more consumer-facing, more user, more grassroots. The other one is just more foundational, which means I think it has to be thought of much more neutrally. It's very neutral, non-political, and very inclusive, and needs to be acceptable in places that are going to view it very differently. Our view is these things have to be accepted in China, in Europe, and the U.S. Clearly. Equally, and those are all very different places. So that's why, again, any notion of it being a political movement, we think is counterproductive. It needs to be seen as really, really neutral, really not scary, really foundational. Even though the technology itself, we think, is very transformational.
Yeah, I'd love to ring Faisal. Faisal, you write so much great content on Quora, which is such a great destination for intelligent conversation. And I've personally learned a lot about it just from reading Faisal's answers. Faisal, what are you thinking so far? What stands out? What would be interesting to dive into a little bit?
Having talked about Ripple with all my clients and everyone, I think it's the only protocol, insofar as I know, that really has a chance of making it in the financial services industry. So far, I mean, Bitcoin is, predominantly banned or a gray area in many of the territories we work with. But Ripple is, something that has a chance because it addresses the lower stacks of the payment stack. It's something that, banks and remittance companies, as Chris said, are pretty much open to use, mostly because of the fact that they can do instantaneous end-to-end settlements. So pretty gung-ho on this thing.
Yeah, I forgot to mention, Chris, Faisal lives in Pakistan, and he is our international expert. So it's interesting to hear his perspective a lot of times, all the time.
That's great. Faisal, we'd love to chat more with you about your, kind of your views, of course. But that is how we see it as well. These things have to be very, very neutral.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I see, Ripple is not one of those protocols. It's not, taken in a negative sense by any of the regulators that we talk to. It's, they mostly see it as just that, a protocol, to enable payments to go faster, and some crude way, like a Swift 2.0. So it's welcome rather than Bitcoin, which is, which sees more scrutiny and subject to, perhaps being banned in their country, etc.
Now, Chris, Faisal has pointed out to us multiple times that the banking environment in the Gulf area countries and particularly in Pakistan is radically different than the United States. Have you had any inroads with foreign banks that you can talk about or in foreign domains?
So we have. I mean, we definitely think, in terms of these, global payments. Again, if these are going to be protocols. I mean, what's interesting, if you look at things like Facebook, obviously have not been able to become part of the scene in China, for example. But those are platforms, right? HTTP is obviously in China. It's everywhere. It's in, everywhere. So that's the way we think these things have to be looked at. So we have had a conversation with lots of international agencies, regulators involved in payments and value exchange, banks all over the world. Our first bank we just integrated, as you may have seen, in a German bank. But we really want to be viewed by the folks that set the rules in various jurisdictions as being an acceptable kind of basic foundational infrastructure. And that's going to be in all parts of the world. So we've had a lot of those conversations. They seem to be going well so far. I think we're in education mode generally, but I do feel as you get more integration globally that you might get some kind of a tipping point where that kind of accelerates. I think super key point though is that these things don't have to replace the rules in any jurisdiction. So whether it be NACHA, SEPA, or anybody's rules can be ported right on top of these basic protocols. I think that's really, really important because it doesn't. We like to say we want to be builders. We don't want to be disruptors. The whole word disruption when it comes to finance, I think, is too scary of a word.
I hear you,
Chris. I had a question. You are positioning yourself more from a B2B perspective. Do you see yourself going into the retail business, the consumer side of it?
So, no, we really see it being aimed at enterprise, which we really think is financial services businesses and remittance companies, banks, around the world, and then developers, supporting developers through our development efforts. The development portal, the REST APIs, the incubators. And we see those developers as the ones that are going to be bringing new services, particularly when you look at all the opportunity in the developed world. I think there's a huge opportunity for developers to know their markets in ways that we could never understand, right? And then also kind of at the enterprise level, again, that idea that suddenly you just go to your online bank or you go to a mobile phone and suddenly you can do something you couldn't do before. That's the way it's manifest itself. And I think from our perspective, we just try to say, what do we do? What do we do well? We want to have sort of the core software development team that's contributing to the protocol, and then the team that's sort of integrating to existing, networks. So if we can just, whatever bridges that we can write to existing protocols, that goes a long way to increasing the utility that ultimately consumers see, but may never know has anything to do with us.
Interesting. Yeah, well, Chris, we've got about 3 minutes left here. What do you see? It'd be interesting to hear. Like at your current stage, I'm looking on the site, and it looks like you've got about how many employees are there now?
53 now.
53.
Yeah.
What do you see that takes you to the next level? Is it just time, sort of grind through it, or are there certain things that you guys are focusing on, and the executive team there to sort of like win over a market, or are you trying to gain mass knowledge? Is that the biggest struggle at this point, or what's sort of the battle that you're trying to win right now that would really sort of put you into that next growth stage?
Yeah, we always think of it in terms of trust, utility, and liquidity. Trust in the protocol that it's going to scale. It's going to be up all the time. We're going to, it can be really easy for gateways and banks to integrate. So continually working on those, APIs and the stability and the scalability. And then the utility, which is all about bringing on value, right? Bringing on gateways globally and in every region in the world. That's how you get the value on the protocol. And then, of course, and that's probably the hard part, right? Because that's mostly involving banks who are going to have the highest level of reputational risk concerns. So that's both technology and that's regulatory. And it's kind of just making sure that these things don't seem scary. And then probably an easier task, which is the market makers, which we've had a lot of luck on. And that's once you get the value in, how do you get it moving around efficiently?
I don't know if I'd call it luck. You guys are doing a great job.
So a lot to do.
Yeah.
A lot to do here, but it's really, really fun and exciting. And I think it's really exciting stuff going on in the world of finance now.
I know, it's incredible. All right, that's about it. Any closing remarks, Brian, Faisal? What do you think? It's been an amazing, insightful
Thank you, Chris, for taking a Saturday out and talking to us. Appreciate it.
Faisal, thank you so much. Mike, we really appreciate it. Really great to be with you guys.
Definitely. Thanks so much, Chris.
Awesome. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Take care now. Bye.